Can relate to the time, stress, and money it takes to earn a master's degree. A former student of a defunct college got his diploma but doesn't have official proof.
Mike McKnight and 6 on Your Side investigates what happened and if it can be fixed.
Before he could deploy to Afghanistan in 2010 and counsel soldiers in a war zone, then Army Chaplain Major Vince Hardy needed a master's degree, so he earned one at Grace University in Omaha.
So the Army was aware that I completed a master's. They allowed me to come back on duty as a chaplain.
Grace closed in 2018, and by law, the University of Nebraska-Lincoln manages the academic records of defunct colleges in the state. That way, if any of the 10,000 alumni needed to show their academic achievements, they know where to find them. But the retired Army chaplain tells me that when it came time to find proof of his master's degree earned at Grace, those records are nowhere to be found. Applying for his doctorate, Vince needs official proof of his master's degree.
I remember going to Grace for my graduate level degree.
But a letter from UNL said, unfortunately, Mr. Hardy's record was not transferred from Grace.
All the effort, all the studying, all the sacrifices, it's coming back now like it didn't count, it didn't matter.
And I've never heard of this happening before.
Dr. Carl Pagan-Kemper was the academic vice president of Grace University when it closed. So how did proof of his master's not transfer from Grace down to the official record keepers?
I don't even know. It could be a mechanical thing where someone actually pressed a button by accident or didn't press it.
But the Grace professor and dean kept records that backed up his former student's proof of a master's degree.
His transcript is clean. It's a good one. It's just not an official one, so that's why I've been willing to go to bat. I'd sent letters and notes off to Lincoln prior.
So after that correspondence and 6 on Your Side emails, Vince Hardy's earned master's degree from Grace University has now been added to his official record kept by the UNL registrar.
I appended an additional note to the tail end of that transcript that basically explained, that record was omitted in error. This particular record was fully validated by, Grace University officials.
Retired chaplain and Army Major Vince Hardy now has his master's degree front and center on his academic record so he can advance forward on earning a doctorate.
Yes, sir. I'm going to be an old student, and I'm going to love every minute of it.
On Your Side near 9th and William, Mike McKnight, 6 News.
Without proof of a master's degree, Vince Hardy says he was denied enrollment in a doctorate program at a university. After our investigation, his academic record is complete and he is reapplying. The UNL registrar says he'll even make a call to confirm the master's degree is valid.